my whole mission the rest of my life is for men to become brothers with men, that we need to be helping each other. So that, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit when we get into why mental health is so relevant now. So
welcome everyone that will be tuning into this NSACF Central Florida. We are excited about having Richard here with us. I'll probably butcher your last name if I say it. Say it for me.
Avdoian.
Avdoian. Richard Avdoian. As you might have heard me say, we met last year, not this past year, but previous years. Influence in Nashville. Had just a awesome time visiting together because we have common interests, that of male mental health. As you know, this is May, is Mental Health Awareness Month. And it is a very serious and in the past had often been overlooked item to deal with, particularly in the male gender. But Richard is here, and we're going to talk a little bit about some of the things that he's doing that highlight and spotlight that industry. Richard, a little bit about him. Richard is a CSP, MSW, CSP. All of Central Florida will be aware of what that is. Help me with MS and MSW.
I have a master's in counseling and a master's in psychiatric social work.
Awesome. So we're talking to someone that has a depth in those areas of psychiatric work or psychological work. In addition to that, the founder of CEO of Midwest Business Institute, Metro St. Louis, and Leadership Coaching and Training Group, and what we'll talk about a lot, Mentoring Men Network in Metro St. Louis. A past president of the Central Florida chapter, the St. Louis chapter in St. Louis, a president of that NSA chapter. And it's just awesome to have you. A whole lot of accolades we can go through, and we'll probably pick up a whole lot of them. Why don't we go to, here's the first question that I'll pick out, and let's just kind of freelance this.
Absolutely.
What works for you, we can go with. What has been in the past your professional work experience in the field of mental health?
Yeah, I'm glad you bring that up because, quite frankly, you said something in my introduction that I want to talk about.
Sure.
When I first got out of graduate school in the late 70s, hospitals didn't call their mental health units. They were psychiatric units. The word psychiatry was buried. It was really perceived as for the schizophrenics, highly suicidal, character disorders, individuals that were hospitalized and heavily medicated with electroshock treatment and what have you. And yet, over time, it became important that they shifted away from psychiatric units, and that's what they were called, to behavioral medicine units. They really tried to really separate themselves from psychiatry because of the misunderstanding of what that unit did.
That's awesome.
When I started in the speaking industry, bureaus encouraged me to not reference the word mental health in any of my contact information or in my credentials because many corporations perceived me as being a touchy-feely speaker and didn't see value in going down that lane in doing presentations. So for many years, it was really in the darkness. And mental health, unfortunately, is seen as something significant that associated with psychiatry, when in fact, a healthy mental health is no different than focus on healthy physical health. And I think we have universally used these terms psychotic and depressed too frequently to really describe things that are really actually very normal. For example, if you go on vacation and it rains the entire vacation, and you come home, or someone calls you while you're on vacation and you say, how you doing? They say, oh, I'm really depressed. Well, are you really depressed, or are you just downhearted and disappointed because it's raining? But they'll use the word depressed. That is something, or psychotic, or she's schizophrenic. They'll use it as an adjective when it really has some real serious definition to that. So we have really mainstreamed those terms to really be defined inappropriately in conversations.
So would you say then that what I see now is a somewhat better embrace of mental health had everything to do with us redefining the words, the terms?
No, I appreciate it. I am so delighted that we have now acknowledged it. It is so mainstream now, the word mental health, which has really warmed my heart, quite frankly, because you're absolutely correct. It's not that we're changing the focus, we're accepting and opening up to understanding the broader term of mental health. Mental health is just self-esteem, enhancing who you are, dealing emotionally with the departure from a job, a death in the family. You're having emotional trauma to the sadness event. That doesn't mean that you're clinically depressed. It means that you're really focusing on your mental health, your thinking, your emotional system. And we need to be doing that more frequently. Well, what's happened now, because of things like COVID, where people were isolated, extroverts really experienced a lot of difficulty because they need people energy. And when they were isolated, they became downhearted and sad, and in some cases, depressed. Then you look like introverts who really are even further isolated during COVID. So they became more apt to possibly be, not that they're the only, that could be suicidal or questioning life, and just so detached that now mental health has become mainstream focus, which, as I said earlier, warms my heart because it's crucially important for our well-being to focus on our emotional and mental functioning.
When I was younger, in college, I worked in, my minor was psychology. So I worked in a mental health unit, and these were people that were medicated, et cetera. They were in some very serious states. I think, and help your opinion on this, when people like Terry Bradshaw, people like Mark Spitz, prominent Simone Biles, if I'm not mistaken, comes out saying that I've had to get some help in areas of mental health. Does that not help to transition us from psychiatric ward to being mentally healthy? Does that help?
Exactly. It's similar to these influencers that young women and young men follow fashion. Influencers who have a voice tend to allow people to say, oh, then it's okay for me. Yeah. Now, quite frankly, by virtue of what you just said, men, particularly men that are perceived, and I say this with humor, manly men, and I'm saying that humorously, quite frankly, when they come out, it's even more powerful because men throughout our lives seek affirmation that we're men amongst men. And historically, crying was looked at as feminine, weak. And even women, quite frankly, frowned upon men that cried.
Yes.
And yet they want men to be emotional. Well, you can't be emotional, but shut down certain emotions.
Right.
But yet we as men have taught each other that you have to shut down certain emotions to be perceived as a manly man.
Right.
Well, that is now becoming shattered.
Yes.
Much like the glass ceiling for women in movement, the glass shield, the armor has been cracked for men to start saying, I could look at my personal dynamics and I'm okay. And they are seeking out men's groups and such, and things are shifting.
Yeah. I think too, the dynamic of the father-son relationship has now turned a grand corner as well. Our generation likely never heard dad say, son, I love you. Not to say that he did not, but it was not words that he could verbalize for fear of, and I did a speech on this once, losing his man card, the manly man, as you say. And yet I'm comfortable saying to my son, 33 years old, I love you, son. And that was something that I had to learn / teach myself / embrace, because I am a different person, comfortable with who I am in my own manhood, that I'm comfortable with that, with emoting that to another male, my son.
You know, I appreciate that. Now, I will share something. I'm Armenian. My wife is Armenian. Armenian men in my family system, men shared love very openly. In fact, it was very customary when I saw my uncles or my cousins or my grandfather or whatever, I kissed them on both cheeks, or they kissed me on both cheeks. And we still to this day do that. However, my son, who is 42, my only child, was okay today. We still do that. But when he was in high school and I would drop him off, or he would take off the car, or if he was playing hockey, he would give me a wink and saying, visualize, I'm kissing you, Dad, but I'm not going to kiss you in front of these guys. And that was our little tip, but he wasn't ashamed, but he didn't want to cause problem for him socially, which was sad, right. But I respected that. Yeah. Now, you brought up father and son, and quite frankly, you're requesting me to do this with you couldn't have come in a better time, because I got in the speaking business, as I told you, by accident years ago. I had no intention of getting in this profession. It all happened, quite frankly, as I said, by accident. But over the time, I developed and started doing corporate training and executive coaching and eventually business coaching. But when I turned 73 years ago, I'll be 73 at the convention, actually. Thank you.
Happy birthday.
Thank you. So I realized I didn't really enjoy doing it anymore. And I was ready to quit NSA and retire or just give up, because I didn't have any plans of what I would do afterwards. And I realized I still have a mission in my heart. And I went back to my roots as a psychotherapist. And I start reminiscing, what were the main issues that men were struggling with 35, 40 years ago? And then realizing that they're still relevant today, the same issues that have been going on for generations. And you touched on the primary one, which is father-son. And as a result of that, and the struggle for men and their fathers, men seek affirmation and approval from men. That's why men seek groups, because they're looking for, where do I fit in these groups? Gang members look for weak boys, because weak boys want to belong, and powerful gang boys can entice these young boys into being in a part of a gang because they need to belong. And if you're a misfit, you're really what I call a mark on the streets. If you know what I'm talking about, a mark is someone that they could take advantage of.
Right.
But we're all seeking that, am I a man amongst men? That whole issue. And we want it from our fathers, but yet it's difficult because fathers didn't get it from their fathers. So we can't blame our dads, but we got to re-educate men on what true fatherhood is and how we need to help our young men, our young boys become men.